And you're very welcome along to the football show here on Indo Sport. Delighted to be joined by Gary Breen. Gary, how are things?
Really good, thank you. Sun beating down here. I've got family over from Cork, so there's a
Oh,
big barbecue on after this.
nice one. Last time I saw you was at Vicar Street. Did you enjoy watching Tony Adams in full flow?
It was brilliant. He was great value. You could tell the crowd obviously were there as Arsenal fans, the majority of them, but he was very good, very revealing. I really enjoyed listening to him. Obviously, he'd been such a big hero of mine as a young boy growing up in and around North London, supporting Arsenal and what he achieved at such a young age. But that kind of like the second part of his life in terms of what he's doing was fascinating to listen to, and it was great. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I know it's been so well received. And he threw a little curveballs in there, didn't he, about the captaincy, which
Yeah,
really it took off about 3 or 4 days later
yeah.
over here. Everyone was going mad for it. Yeah, it was incredible. But even that, to say something like that, and then Arteta to react the way he did to
Mm.
what seemed to be just to take a vote on it is incredible. That I mean, listen, Tony Adams is an iconic man around Arsenal, but if you're a manager of them now, I wouldn't be expecting you to take much notice of what people on the outside are saying and to be influenced as much as they were, which just shows how big a voice he has.
Absolutely. And there's a few other things that you and Tony and Damien teed up in your preview, which have already begun to be borne out this season. So we'll get to those in
Cool.
a little while. But just a reminder, our football coverage is in association with Sky Sports, where you can experience more exclusive live sport than anywhere else. With Sky Sports and Sports Extra, you can watch every live Premier League match this season. This weekend sees United Burnley in the Saturday 3 o'clock kickoff. That's on Premier Sports. And then on Super Sunday, there are four live games on across Sky Sports, including Liverpool versus Arsenal. Get Sky Sports and Sports Extra on Sky, or stream it all with Now. As mentioned, Gary, plenty to reflect on the weekend just gone, but I might actually start the review by looking ahead to next week, and it's such a big week for Ireland and the international break, the squad being announced tomorrow, and I
Yeah.
can rarely remember such an acute feeling that the first game or this first series of games is kind of make or break. Anytime we've qualified for a major tournament, we've started fast in these campaigns, and with Hungary at home it just feels like that's a big one. And it kind of warmed my heart at the weekend to see Josh Cullen goal and assist, Nathan
Yeah.
Collins and Kelleher training every day together, kept a clean
Yeah.
sheet as well. We've three club captains in the Premier League. It's just good to see that sort of leadership coming back. I know you covered the Celtic game last week. Liam Scales captaining Celtic at the weekend. That's not to mention Evan Ferguson, Troy Parrott doing their thing abroad. So it's I'd just be keen to get your sense. It is good, as much as international football and club football are separate, going into international break with good vibes at club level can only be a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the confidence of the players going in there, and I always feel that the first part of a season suits us better. All the lads have had a break. I know a lot was made about Jaime resting a lot of players, and we're going to hopefully see the benefit of that. But they'll have had good, strong pre-seasons. There seems to be so many of the squad now doing really well for their club at various levels, but they do look like they're strong levels. And you're right to mention the players. I covered the Brentford game on Saturday for Premier Sports, and Collins looks now he's got real presence. I know he's been admired by a lot of the bigger clubs, but you always felt as a young centre half, and this is often the case, that there'll be mistakes in his game, and we've seen that with Ireland. But with the armband at Brentford now, alongside the Ireland armband, he has a real sense of maturity about his game. Those mistakes are being ironed out, and he looks a real presence. Ball comes in a box. He's so big to get around. Really impressive, and as you quite rightly say, Queeving behind him as well. So that's great in terms of that relationship that you're building. It's so important, because sometimes you can go with the international team and you got to learn about your players, your teammates very quickly. The fact that they're playing and training, like you said, every day together bodes so well for us. I have so many positives. I think O'Shea at Ipswich looks like he's got a home. I think he'll be strong this year. O'Brien at Everton. But there's just so many of the players, like you said, Parrott's full of goals, building on what he did last year. Evan made a strong debut for Roma. So I am going into this campaign now with genuine belief and hope that we can do something. You're quite right to reference just how important that start is, because it's the difference. You get off the mark early, the confidence builds. The flip side of that is, and what has been the case far too often in recent campaigns, is that within a couple of games we're out of it already.
Yeah.
So it's so important. So I am going into this with a lot of confidence. I do feel as well that the fact that the campaign is competed over 10 weeks as opposed to 14, 15 months, if we got all our lads fit and they stay healthy, we're in a great position.
Yeah, and obviously you mentioned Jake O'Brien there. It's just important to see these players competing
Yeah,
at top level. But there are,
yeah,
it's on the Premier League as much as we'd like to see. Like back in your day, a big Premier League representation. The Championship is so thoroughly competitive now, and you see the like of Mikey Johnson getting on the score
yeah,
sheet. Like, so it's just good to see general positive form because it's. I remember that whole Club Wales thing where when Wales got to the Euro semi-final, and it wasn't
yeah,
necessarily off the back of these unbelievable club players, but when they went to Wales, it was like a different thing. Wales
yeah,
was the club, and they had Gareth Bale, which
yeah.
was a big help. But I can't help but think the best chance Ireland have of performing in these games is to come in good spirits.
Yeah, no, it's so important. And you reference Wales there. It's about momentum.
Mm.
And when we qualified for the World Cup, we had that as well. We had the disappointment of going close to that campaign before, and then suddenly we just felt it was our time. And I'm hoping that these guys, after having so many disappointments, feel that as well.
Yeah.
And they must be going into this campaign now, really believing that they can do something. But obviously, like you said, it's all well and good having a great spirit, but it's about what you do on the pitch. And we've heard far too often over the last few years about these players saying they've got a great spirit. They need to show it.
Yeah. And we'll move off that now, but it was interesting to see Evan Ferguson made his debut.
Yeah.
Already comparisons, Gary, you're going to love these. From Mateus Sula, his teammate. He's technically very strong, he's powerful, and I hope he can give his best to Roma. His style reminds me of Batistuta and Higuain. So if he turns out to be even half of those
Yeah.
two players or something in between, it would be, I think we'll get to the World Cup, Gary.
I will take that all day. But listen, if you said about him is something we have seen when he burst on the scene at Brighton, technically very good. The way they play, you had to be coming off the centre backs and taking that first straight pass to release the rest of the team. And for some reason or another, based ultimately, I think, around injuries, stopped his momentum. And of course, he's such a young player that you're still learning all the time. And I always felt that the key for him and for any player is just stay healthy. And I think the fact that when we mentioned it about good pre-season, he's had a break away from football, because when you're injured and the likes are going to West Ham, it always felt like he was chasing his form and really, desperate to do well. And ultimately, you can try a little bit too hard. I think it'd be important now that he stepped away in the summer, had a break, just reassessed everything. I know his dad well, so he'll understand football. And I think he's got a great family and network around him. So I fully expect him to show his potential once again.
Absolutely. And just on the Irish team, I know you covered the Brentford match, as you said. What were your impressions? It's obviously a huge win. It can't be overstated to get that first win for Keith Andrews as manager, and against Aston Villa as well, Champions League outfit in recent years. So what were your overall impressions of that game?
Really impressed by Brentford. You're right. I felt the pressure was really on, even after just 2 games. You've got a rookie manager coming in. There was obviously a lot of talk about them being in trouble for relegation because of the quality of player that has left. 68% of their goals from last season has gone out of the building, or will do when Vissa goes at the end of this transfer window. So it's about replacing that. And certainly that front three that they had in place, Ouattara got the goal, but they looked like a real energetic front three. They bullied the Villa centre-backs and the Villa full-backs. They were bumping into them. Those Villa players were going down, looking to the referee for support rather than rolling them sleeves up and saying, "No, we'll take this challenge on." And the one thing I can say when doing the commentary is that, in stark contrast to last week away at Forest, this Brentford team looked like a Brentford team that we had seen survive in the Premier League and then thrive in the Premier League. They looked like that team again. And I felt that getting that win was so important for them, and for Keith especially, just to kind of, as a vindication of him ultimately getting the job, but a belief system in terms of not only the supporters but the players. And you could see what it meant to them afterwards. They were very direct. They asked questions of Villa, who couldn't answer those questions. Villa looked powder puffed. They look like there's something wrong at Villa at the moment, whether or not they're struggling to get recruitment in. The fact that they're having to sell players who are through and through Villa, like Ramsey having to go to Newcastle, even though as a young boy he stood on the whole end. And this financial regulations mean you're selling one of your own. It just doesn't feel right, and it didn't feel right looking at Villa. But take nothing away from Brentford, they're impressive and they were well worth that win.
Yeah, like much is made of the through line that Keith Andrews is following here. Like Brentford had done this with Thomas Frank, brought him in a backroom capacity. He got the main job. And there's almost a sense that by hiring from within, you know what you're getting. But it kind of works both ways. And you were making this point to me that Keith Andrews also knows what works on the pitch. Like he's been there, he's seen the Thomas Frank approach. So as much as I'd like to ask you about Keith Andrews, have you seen a Keith Andrews imprint on this team? It's probably too early to glean that anyway, but the best thing you can say about him is he's not trying to like fix something that's not broken.
Yeah, no, he came out and he said, "Listen, I came into the club. I could see how well run it was from top to bottom, and that is it's probably one of the clubs, them and Brighton, where that's the only place he's ever going to get an opportunity as his first managerial job because he'll take that chance. They've obviously identified he's a really good coach. They'll put an infrastructure in place to allow him to show that. But I think if you're asking me, what did I see? I could see that there was a togetherness, and that's something that he has no doubt." Worked hard on in pre-season to make sure, because there's a lot of change at Brentford, and I think a lot of the players who are being left behind as other players are going on to bigger and better clubs may well feel that, listen, I might be looking over their shoulder to see whether or not they can move, but he's quickly galvanized them to say, no, listen, this is still a great club for you to be playing at. And you could say to those lads that then they come here, put in a really good Premier League performance and over a number of months, maybe years, and those bigger clubs will come looking, as they have done previously. But I think it was important that the new signing Ouattara impacted straight away, and he absolutely did. He looked so aggressive, so full of running. He got his goal, so you would think now that his confidence levels will be high. But I enjoyed them. I think when they got their goal, they recognised then, and Keith showed his tactical awareness where they blocked the game out. They went to a narrow back five. They thickened the midfield, and they literally said to Villa, "Okay, break us down," and they couldn't because of how dominant Collins was in his back line and how composed and calm and reassuring Queeving was behind him in goal.
And just on the Villa point, before we move off this match, like I wonder what it's like for a player in the dressing room where the recruitment's just not happening, and they were going for Champions League, like had a strong finish but didn't quite make it, and the likes of Marcus Rashford, who was central to that, is out of the building. Asensio, I know they're trying to get to come back, but you know, I think it's probably as important for the players as the manager to see new arrivals coming in, and that sense that we're getting stronger, and this result won't help that mood, I don't think.
No, and the mode, you're so right there, because it felt as if, looking at Emery as well, because when he initially came into the building at Villa, he said, listen, I'm not going to stand still. I'm coming here, and they've got really good financial muscle, the owners at Villa, but they can't flex those muscles because of the regulations. So for him, it must be so frustrating. And you hit the nail on the head there. In the season where you think the next year you're going to get stronger, it actually looks like they've got weaker. It genuinely does. They play two centre-backs who are left-footed in Mings and Pau Torres. And you never normally see that. Left footers always get to play on the left-hand side. Right footers quite often, because there's so many of us at the back, have to play on the left. But it looked all wrong. You see the goal, they looked a complete mess. And even their setup, which at times could have exposed Brentford, but the final pass was so bad. And you could see the frustrations of Emery. And I just feel that, I don't know, all the energy and the positivity around that club, especially on the back of those Champions League big nights last year, suddenly they just miss out at the last moment. They can't strengthen again. I think they need to have a really good reboot. They'll probably have this last game before the international break, and we'll have to assess where they actually are, because they don't look anywhere near as good as they did last year.
And we mentioned Thomas Frank a few minutes ago.
Oh, yeah.
Big result, like a statement result. And like, to be fair, an impressive start to the season generally. Before we get to him specifically, it's hard to overlook the fact that Europa League final, Romero, Van de Ven back together again. And they've been there to start the season. Romero, having been linked with Atletico Madrid, is staying. And just looking at the stats, like 52% win rate with those two together, 25% win rate when they're not playing together. Like, but an interesting point you made at Vicar Street, that Postecoglou did change for the Europa League final, but potentially didn't change enough prior to that. And maybe if he had shown the flexibility that Thomas Frank is now showing, where game to game he'll match up his team to the opposition, things could have been different there.
Absolutely, because you can't, as much as Big Ange tried to control the narrative by saying, listen, we kind of sacrificed the league to focus on the Europa League. They didn't. I've covered a lot of Tottenham games. They still had enough players. You can't lose. Tottenham can't lose 22 games in a season. It's just not. It's not acceptable. And you look at the way, and then suddenly you look at the players and you think, listen, they did have injuries, but other teams had injuries and coped. The likes of Bournemouth, they were decimated, and it happens. But now when you look at them, and I can't emphasize just how important it is to have your first choice back four in place, because last season, before even this one, and that's 2 clean sheets in a row at the beginning of this season, but last season, if those centre backs and Porro as well and the goalkeeper were in place, that their results were averaging 2 points a game. They'd have been second in the Premier League. Now, that's not to say it would have gone that way, but just shows the impact that it makes. But ultimately, when you watch them now, Ronan, and I covered them last week in their first game against Burnley, the back line just drops about 5 or 6 yards deeper, and they're comfortable. They're not standing on a halfway line with their fingers crossed, hoping someone's offside, and the team have just got that easy ball in behind them. Now they're actually in place where you actually have to get past them. You don't get a free run at them just because they're so high, and they were impressive. Romero, you said about Atletico Madrid. I've never seen anyone who looks more like an Atleti player than he does. And he has that about him. He's got the armband now. And I was a little bit worried about how confrontational he is, but he looks like he's mellowed a little bit, so he won't be at risk at getting booked early and vulnerable to red cards as such. But they look good. And they look good because of Thomas Frank. There was so much talk about him going in there and the Tottenham fans saying, we don't want a long ball merchant from Brentford and all like that. But it's not that. He cuts his cloth accordingly, and he plays the opposition, as you quite rightly said. He recognised that City are not particularly comfortable with direct play. We've seen it with their centre halves. We've seen it so often. If you actually attack the likes of Diaz and Stones, as opposed to sitting off them and letting them dictate play at the back, they struggle to defend, and they got bullied. And the goal that they conceded was an example of that. And City, for all Pep changing the kind of dynamic of the club, kind of going towards the way that Iriola's playing at Bournemouth, he said last year, that's the way football's going. Quick transitions, get the ball forward. And we've seen that with his recruitment. But they are vulnerable still to direct play, and they need to address that. But I think that Thomas Frank's been so impressive. When you look at players, when you go into the squad and you see the manager, what the difference he makes to people who are kind of on the periphery, not really contributing. Richarlison looks rejuvenated. He looks brilliant up front. The central midfield, the three-man central midfield of Palhinha, Bentancur and Sarr on Saturday at the Etihad was sensational. And Palhinha is such a throwback central midfielder.
Some player, isn't he?
I love watching him because it does remind me of how they used to be. Vieira, Keane. I'm not putting him at that level, but central midfielders who went and made tackles. So often now, central midfielders just sit in that position in front of the back four and look to collect players. Paulinho goes out hunting, making challenges, and he loves it. And the opposition don't enjoy playing against it. I think that's been such a shrewd signing. And the positivity around Spurs, especially on the back of Eze blanking them and the way that Morgan Gibbs-White didn't come through as well. But there's no kind of feeling sorry for themselves with Thomas Frank. He's put on a charm offensive, and those supporters who were doubting him absolutely love him now.
Yeah. And just on City, it's an interesting one. Like, for all manner of means, like if this was any other manager, you look at this squad and think this is a squad in transition. You know, they've invested in a couple of young players. Like Cherky, I'm sure will come good, but like he's not exactly a win now signing. And there's a couple of others, like granted, Ait-Nouri is a Premier League proven player, and Reinders comes with big potential. But these aren't necessarily signings where you're like, wow, City have splashed the cash and have really closed the gap to reclaim the title. So as I was saying, I think this looks like a transition phase for City.
Yeah.
We never really think that when Pep is in charge, but this was the youngest City team that they fielded in the Premier League since 2010. So, you know, there are lots of changes happening there, and I just wonder, do we kind of have to make our peace with that this isn't quite the Man City of old?
No, absolutely. And you think about it, that first season when he came into City as well, he identified that his fullbacks, Kolarov and Zabaleta, aging players. He started the season with them. They'd done brilliant, but it quickly became apparent to him he needed to regenerate the squad, and he did that amazingly. We can see that with all the titles. But it's true. I genuinely feel that City will have a lot of bedding in to do. I think Liverpool would have to do that, even though they're the champions with the players that are there coming in. United, of course, as well. And Chelsea with the turnover of players. It's only really Arsenal who seem to have that continuity in terms of, I know they've added to those players, those problem areas, but it looks like everyone knows their roles. Everyone's built their relationships with their teammate that's immediately around them. I think Arsenal in a great position in a way. Listen, City, Liverpool, Chelsea, all these teams, they've got great players, but it will take time for them just to adjust in terms of what they were doing. You think about Slot winning the league last year, it's because he didn't do anything. He didn't mess around with a squad. He looked at what he had, made no signings other than Chiesa, and literally said, okay, well, listen, I've got enough in the building. And he'd done a magnificent managerial job there to win the title. Be interesting to see how he now builds this new Liverpool team in a way that City and Pep are going to have to do that as well. We're seeing it, and United are doing it, but they're struggling in terms of where they are. But Arsenal, I'm just looking at Arsenal now, and I'm thinking that strength in depth. I know that it's still a concern that the likes of Odegaard's been injured, Saka's been injured. Maybe they'll miss that game now at Liverpool, but they look like they're strong, Arsenal.
Yeah. And just last one on City, like it's funny, James Trafford got
Yeah,
famous for those post-match interviews after his games in the Championship and his clean sheet runs, and it just showed that the step up is significant to Premier League. And it was interesting to me that like City are being linked with Donnarumma now. So for all the like goalkeepers who are feet first and it's about playing out from the back, he, to your Palhinha point, is more of a throwback. So it would be interesting if Pep,
yeah.
who with Victor Valdez brought in all this like playing from the 6 yard box, actually reverts back and says, actually, I want a safe pair of hands here first and foremost.
Yeah. But listen, it's incredible because I just cannot see Donnarumma going to City because that's the reason why PSG are getting rid of him because he can't play out with his feet. Trafford can, and he can make saves. He's not the biggest, but he's athletic. He can get to those top corners to make the save. That mistake was literally just that he doesn't pass the ball on the safe side of the midfielder. The midfielder came short, offered himself. You play it to his left foot, the challenge can't be made from behind. He doesn't. It's a poor pass, and it's something that we got so used to seeing with Burnley, didn't we, last time they were in the Premier League? But I can't, for the life of me, see Donnarumma go in there. I just think he's the most furthest thing from a Pep goalie that I've ever seen.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on that one. It's one to
Yeah.
watch. We may as well move to Man United. It's a miracle we've got 25 minutes into a football show without mentioning them.
Yeah.
We should probably start with the eye-catching incident from that game. So Bruno Fernandes penalty miss. Would be interested to get your thoughts on the awarding of the penalty and all that. But we'll start with the outcome, and these were Bruno Fernandes' thoughts speaking to Sky Sports about how all that unfolded.
Before your penalty, it looked like the referee kind of bumps into you. I don't know if that affected your concentration at all because you seemed pretty upset about it.
Yeah, I was upset. Obviously, as every penalty taker, you have your own routines, you have your own things that you do. It upset me because the referee didn't apologize, and that was what which triggered me in the moment. But that's not the excuse to missing the penalty. I just had a very bad hit on the ball. I took my foot too under the ball, and that's why the ball ended up going over the bar.
So Bruno, at the best of times, Gary, divisive figure, and that's putting it kindly. Like, I would have some sympathy for him in the sense that he's the rare spark of quality in this one of the worst Man United teams ever. So, and he's ploughing a lonely furrow often, but it's hard to argue yesterday. Like, leadership qualities were off the mark. You can't have your captain being put off by a referee bumping into him by mistake, and then and then you could actually see in the match that this was affecting him. Like, his whole vibe was off yesterday, and I just wonder, it doesn't do him any favors in terms of that perception.
No, and how sensitive he is that he wanted an apology off the referee. The referee's looking completely the other way. He doesn't mean to bump into him, and he's got enough time. He picks the ball up, he resets it again for the penalty, and but then he says, like, listen, no excuse, I missed the penalty. But you're right in terms of leadership qualities, because if you think about that equaliser for Emil Smith-Rowe, it's just run off of Bruno, and Bruno's immediate reaction is to put his hands up in the air and look at his defence. Every one of that United defence has got a man to mark. Bruno at his goal side of Smith-Rowe when the ball is wide. He just does not stay with a runner. And his first thought, and like you said about leadership qualities, is not to hold his hand up and say, what was I thinking? I just switched off a little bit there. It's immediately to look elsewhere for the blame. And that's why people will always question that in terms of that. But I agree with you. Without his goals and his kind of personality as such, I don't know where United will be. And you looked at United initially and thought, okay, there looks like there's a bit of energy. Amorim talked about the fact that he's really enjoying the environment that the training ground has, that he feels that he's got those supposed or those bad eggs out of the club. But as soon as you play football, it gets back to it, and you look at the problems. You think, yeah, Cunha looks decent and stuff, and I thought he played really well against Arsenal, caused them problems just in those little pockets, give Ben White a tough time. And then, of course, he could have had 3 goals within the opening 15 minutes at Craven Cottage. He was that good. But the reality remains is that it's still just one own goal in 2 games, and with all the money they spent in that forward line, and that would be the worry again, because the forward line looks different. Šeško hasn't come in and started the game yet, but the defence looks worryingly the same.
Yeah. It goes without saying, you have a keener eye for this than me. But it's interesting. I thought De Ligt was kind of quite good marshalling the centre of that back three. But for the goal, he seems to be doing that thing where he's like always muscling the player at the front post away and letting it run through. Like, are you almost deceived playing in the back three that you're always half thinking another of my centre back partners will be behind me here? And as it turns out, Bruno didn't track the run,
Yeah.
and Smith Rowe to tap in.
I think he's thinking because it's an in-swing and ball, it's relatively flat, he's going to comfortably go to his goalkeeper. He probably doesn't realise that there's a run from Smith Rowe off of the back of Bruno, but for such a commanding presence, and we've always done, we've done things like that before where you think, I can head it, but I maybe can kill a bit of time, let it come through to my goalkeeper, and then you don't.
Yeah.
You think about Queven making that mistake up at Newcastle, thinking he can let the ball run past him, let the ball go out, kill a bit of time, and then they score. So it's those little moments, but I think Dillit did well against Gyökeres last week. I think he enjoyed that physical battle. It's a concern for me. I think Yoro's got great recovery pace, but he looks very young and he does make mistakes and he can get himself out of trouble with that recovery pace, but you don't really want to make those mistakes. But the worrying thing for United and must remain is that for all that money spent in those forward positions, they're still throwing Maguire on late on, hoping that he's going to get a goal. And he actually should have done. He had a free header. He should have scored, actually, late on in that game. But I don't know. Bayern in goal lacks presence. Looks like he's terrified of corners. We saw Arsenal expose that. And that will be the concern. And, we're fortunate. I felt that penalty that they got, I felt it was actually a foul the other way on Mount and Shaw. I've got no interest in attacking that ball whatsoever. They're just looking to block those zonal markers for Fulham. So he just shrugs him out of the way. Why VAR is getting involved in that is ridiculous. And then when you want him to get involved, when Yoro's pushing Bassi under the ball, which he's a big, strong, powerful man. But when you're set and you're just about to jump up and someone just does that handed push into the base of your back, you're going to go under the ball. He knows he is under the ball, and that's why he collapses late on to really emphasise it to the referee. But it is a foul. It is a foul for me, as much as I'll be wanting him to be stronger in that situation. So for United, fortunate there, very fortunate.
No, it's interesting. I was going to ask you about that. It's good to get your insight on those two incidents because, I kind of had the same reading of those.
Yeah.
And then you touched on it very shrewdly, I suppose, on they've looked at the numbers, the raw numbers that Sesko, Cunha and Mbeumo scored more goals between the three of them than United scored all with the whole club last season. So, but it's not as simple as that. Like, you can't just plug the statistics into the team. And for all the money, as you said, they've spent, the midfield, we're not breaking any news here, but like Fernandes, Casemiro, then Mount is your next option, then Ugarte comes on. Like in those positions in a 2, like it's probably not going to work. And then I just see Alex Crook reporting today from TalkSport that Kobbie Mainoo open to leaving if an offer comes in. So I'm not saying Mainoo is the saviour and he's not going to be the best midfielder in the world or anything like that. But I do get the impression that if he's your 5th choice option in a system, that maybe the system is the problem.
Yeah, and we just know this manager's not going to deviate from it. When you think about Kobbie Mainoo, last year, Amorim said, listen, I'm not going to play him in a deep position because he can't defend there. So I'm going to play him, and he kind of played him as a false number 9 at one stage, and he got a goal and stuff like that. But it literally was an admission by the manager to say, I need to keep Mainoo as far away from my own box as I possibly can, get him up there. Not because he's like a brilliant number 10 or he'll be a threat. It's just that I've got to play him up there, keep him away. Then the flip side of that, you think, all right, you need a combative midfielder. You need legs in midfield United. They're desperate for it. Ugarte is that man who's brought in, who would have worked with Amorim before. And he's not picking him. He's still going back to Casemiro, who was, I covered every game in their run to the Europa League final last year for Premier Sports. And you could just see it unfolding. You could literally see that in Europe, where the game's slower paced, it's more ball control, as opposed to how direct the transitions are in the Premier League, is that Casemiro was effective. But if you watch the game since, and listen, United fans know this, every supporter knows this, even against Arsenal, there was one occasion where Odegaard gets the ball, he drops a shoulder, and he just collapses, Casemiro. He just can't move his feet anymore. And he's been a wonderful footballer, but age catches up with everyone. And if you make that midfield big and there's loads of space, which it's going to be because Bruno's not disciplined, he's going to run wherever he wants to influence the game. And we've seen him do that. He does have a positive influence, but a negative one in terms of how open and how exposed he leaves Casemiro. So you're looking at a scenario and you're thinking, this is just the same old stuff again. It's so difficult to look at it and say, and I'm doing Manchester United against Burnley on Saturday. And I want to see it live to see, okay, you watch the highlights, you watch the games on the telly, and you're kind of thinking, okay, what's happening here? What really is? Where are they as the ball's up that side of the pitch? How quickly are they adjusting defensively for those quick transitions? I'm fascinated to see how it will go, but I'm pretty sure I know how it will play out. And I just think that, listen, as much as they played that money on those forward lines, the glaring problems for United remain, that they just don't have legs in midfield.
Yeah. And you've touched on Arsenal already, and Sean is an Arsenal fan in the office, and he's making the point, like, they look very complete squad-wise, and it's hard to argue. Like,
Is he annoying you? Is he annoying you like most Arsenal fans are?
Look, it's good. Like, the Liverpool game will tell a tale, Gary, I think, in a few days. But it'll be interesting to see. Like, I'm not sure if they make the DVD about this season. I'm not sure a 5-0 win against newly promoted Leeds will be the turning point. But having said that, few notable things, both positive and negative. Very important that Gyökeres got that monkey off his back and scored a goal early on. So that's kind of been put to bed, and a well taken goal, the first one. And then, like, Max Damon making his debut, like, that could be a Wayne Rooney style, reeling in the ears, like, where were you and that, because he looks very special. And then, of course, Eze unveiled before, like, Diamond's one for the future, Eze's one for right now. So from that point of view, it's looking good for Arsenal. And Zubimendi, I thought, as well, did well.
Yeah, listen, I know Arsenal fans every year think this is the year, but I genuinely look at them and thinking, if they don't do it now with this squad that is available and the depth and the options that they have, then ultimately it's not the players that are the problem. I think it will very quickly be assumed that Arteta is, that he just can't get them over the line. This club, Arsenal, have given him everything now in terms of the investment, time, which is probably what all manager wants more than anything else. But the depth that they have now is remarkable. It literally is where you look at it and think it's only really Saliba and Gabriel. I mean, Mascara comes in as a new centre half. Let's see how he does. You think that maybe there's a bit of vulnerability there if they come out of the team. But in terms of the fullbacks, it's pretty much like for like. Calafiori, Lewis Skelly at left back, the Timber White right back. The depth they have in midfield now in terms of they can play literally any real combination, but the front forward line as well. And Gyökeres coming in now is, I don't ultimately, and I never felt this, that by getting that number 9 in, is that he would play every game. I just think that there's the option there that he will be available to him. I still think at times, Arteta, if everyone's fit, he may well go with Havertz in terms of that, packing that midfield a bit. But what is interesting about Gyökeres is that he is a centre forward that all he cares about is scoring goals. Now, that might seem like a flippant thing to do, but if you think about the iconic centre forwards at Arsenal, Van Persie, Henry, they like getting involved in the play as well. Bergkamp, those type of guys, they love that as well, that part of the game. He's going to have no interest in that. He's going to be like Ian Wright. It's just numbers for him, and numbers in a way that Van Nistelrooy used to be for United. I'm not saying he's at that level. It'd be interesting to see how he does develop. But he gives him that physicality when the ball can come into the box. The problem is for him, and the frustration certainly in the opening couple of games, is that the team have to learn about his strengths and he has to learn about them. And Arsenal do have a reluctance to actually cross the ball. Despite the fact that the likes of Marina Rice are so dangerous in terms of breaking late from midfield, they still want to work them little combinations in and around the box because of the technical players that they have. So that will take a bit of time. But I'm just looking at Arsenal now and I'm just thinking the goalkeeper is in great form. He saved them on a couple of occasions, some big saves. And Dauman, 15 years of age, Ronan. It's ridiculous. Did you see him?
Yeah.
Because Arsenal fans, we've kind of known about this kid since he was like 9 or 10. Because at 12, he was playing for the under 18s. 12, that's how good he is. And you're thinking, okay, at 15, is he there? Is he at this level because of physicality in a way that Wayne Rooney was? Wayne Rooney at 16 was a bull of a centre forward, so strong. And you look at Max Dauman coming onto the pitch yesterday, and you're thinking, oh my God, man, he looks like a child.
Yeah.
And then he gets that ball, he runs at a fullback, and he has that physical, I don't know what it is. He
beats
had the
him down.
presence to take the contact from the fullback, who's probably thinking, I'm going to smash you early, and let's see what you're like. And then the trickery, I mean, this guy is sensational. He's not alone because Wanyeri's the same. He has that ability. Lewis Skelly, they've established themselves in the squad. Dauman's been doing his GCSEs this season, so I don't even know how he's going to get time to play for Arsenal. It was amazing to see just how good he is.
Yeah, it's
And that is a signing. I mean, he is everything, and he is everything that's been missing from Arsenal in terms of they can be so formulaic in terms of watching them play, and it's a bit one-dimensional. It's only really Saka who gives that creativity. Suddenly now Eze comes into the building. And he plays a completely different level in terms of seeing passes, something off the cuff. Whether or not that will be coached out of him by Arteta remains to be seen. But he does look like the final piece. As much as they talk about the number 9 coming into the building, you have to have creativity to open up teams on the low block. Arsenal struggled to do that last season. They won't this.
Yeah, no, Nwaneri all of a sudden feels like an old man.
Yeah,
It's
that's
like
unbelievable.
it's remarkable. Um, just before we get to tonight's game, which promises to be
Oh,
absolutely a powder keg, West Ham, Chelsea, like it might have been passed people by, happened on Friday night, so a lot has happened since then. But London Derby, obviously, and Chelsea quietly doing their thing. Like I think they're potentially people look at the Chelsea project and think it's a bit. We just haven't seen this before, like this turnover of players, but quietly, like they look strong, and they obviously had that eye-catching win in the Club World Cup. Um, but I wondered, to your eye, was that the story, or was it more the worry that's starting to creep in for the home team there? Because West Ham looked abject towards the end of that game.
yeah, they did. They did. And the pressure is really on. I played in that game, West Ham Chelsea. It's a big game. Doesn't really get the billing of some of the other London derbies or the other ones throughout the Premier League. But that is a really, really a lot of animosity in that game. Now, you think that that's your first home game for West Ham on the back of being beaten so comfortably by a promoted team. We're led to believe that the promoted teams are going to struggle. And then they put 3 goals past you. Then at home, you get a good start. You're thinking, okay, and then suddenly you get gumped 5-1. That's 8 goals conceded in 2 games. Now, so many people from the outside looking in at West Ham will say, well, listen, yeah, be careful what you wish for. You didn't want David Moyes. You didn't want that so-called defensive football. You want to be expansive at West Ham, the West Ham way. We've heard it so often with Big Sam when he was the manager there that he had to live against that. But West Ham fans didn't want Lopetegui. That's not what they wanted when they said they wanted to change from David Moyes. They just wanted to see a football which it ultimately is an entertainment business. So when you go to football, you want to be entertained, you want to enjoy. You don't want to see teams defending a 1-goal lead or whatever. But they've gone the flip side here. Potter, you're looking at the scenario now. He looked like he wilted under the pressure at Chelsea. Will it all come hard and fast at West Ham? And I think he's going to have to really turn that round quickly. And I'm not sure that this West Ham squad will be able to do that.
And as I alluded to, could be the best to last on this Premier League weekend, Gary. Newcastle,
Wow.
Liverpool. It's probably the most eye-catching tie of the Premier League season so far, early as it is. But just given the context, like it's going to be the atmosphere at
Wow.
night time at St James's Park is good at the
Yeah.
best of times, but it's going to be electric. I don't know. You can take this wherever way you want. Like the game itself is interesting, but then, as I said, the Isak thing and just Newcastle almost emboldened by having this want away presence in their club and trying to show we don't need him. But I feel like they could be doing with him this evening.
My God, the atmosphere there is going to be incredible. It's a bank holiday in England at the moment. So those Newcastle supporters are probably gathered early. They'll be in full voice. This Premier League has been a great so far. I mean, we're only 2 goals in. It's so exciting when it's back, and it kind of like just produces these games. And you're thinking in terms of the backstory that Isak, what he's doing and stuff like that. It's Liverpool. I mean, I think so many people will be tuning into that game tonight. It'll be white hot, that atmosphere. And that's a challenge straight away now for these. We said about these Liverpool players who are coming into the team. I know like the likes of Kirkes at left back is experiencing it in the Premier League with Bournemouth and what have you, but it'll be a real eye opener. Verts, I'm looking forward to seeing how he copes with it in terms of the atmosphere will be, the supporters will be right on top of them. Liverpool look strong if they get Isak, and we said this in that kind of show with Tony Adams about if they do get Isak, then they're way ahead of everyone else. I don't believe that. I genuinely don't. I think they'll be full of goals, but I think it'll be hard to kind of make sure that everyone contributes. It's a long season, and Ekitike has been so impressive at the beginning. He's a young centre forward to put all the hopes on him, and they've lost 3 of their forwards through players leaving, and of course the tragedy that happened with Jota. So they probably do need that man in the building. I've looked at them defensively, that they look vulnerable, Liverpool. I don't know what's happened. Maybe Gravenberch not being there for that first game makes a big difference. And of course he does in midfield. He's that physical presence. But what a game. What a game. For Newcastle, they do miss the centre forward. There's no doubt about it. They've kind of tried to improvise with Anthony Gordon going at centre forward. Everton tried that as well. And he's a great forward. He's a willing runner, but the instinct's not there. And a couple of times ball comes into the box, he's on his heels. He doesn't anticipate where it's going to go. So they do need an out-and-out forward. And with the window still being open, it feels like one move will trigger everyone else's kind of work. And we're just waiting to see whether or not that one move and the big move, whether or not it will be Isak.
And just lastly, before I let you go, have you ever had that dynamic in like the dressing room where maybe not your best player, but one of your best players is basically saying, I don't want to be here anymore. Does it affect you day to day? Like, do you even pass any remarks in training? It doesn't help that he was so important to the team. Like, it is a big absence, in the way they play even.
No, it's massive. It really is in terms of his quality, because I think he's arguably the best centre forward in Europe in terms of what he is, because he's multifunctional. He's not like Haaland. He can get those Haaland goals, but he can come into 10. He ruined Arsenal last year in that League Cup run. We talked about Saliba, Gabriel being really aggressive centre backs, bullying Haaland, really wanting that physical challenge. They didn't want anything to do with it, with Isak. They were dropping off, giving him all the space in the world. I have experienced it in terms of top players leaving my club at Coventry, where, you're doing well, whether it be Dion Dublin initially, Darren Huckabee, and then, of course, Robbie Keane, being so good. And then he's going to Inter Milan. But they never felt, as much as you knew they were going and it was happening, it never felt as if they weren't going to contribute, or they weren't going to be in and around the training ground in a way that Isak has kind of down tools, won't train with a team or anything like that. So that must have an impact, because your teammates are probably looking at him. They understand. They do. Of course they do. You have a short career. They will know. And I'm sure he'll have told them that what he was not promised, because unless it's in writing, it means nothing. His interpretation of what they said may well be true in his mind, but the club may well have been true in their mind. But unless it's in black and white and there's a figure, you think about Jack Grealish. It's 100 million. If someone bids it, you're gone. There's no mucking about. Now, his agent hasn't done it well enough. He's gone to the club, and it's a big investment for around £60 million by Newcastle. His agent should have been saying something like, well, listen, if you double your money, even if you double your money and someone comes in with 120, Newcastle are probably going to give you that option, because they're going to think, well, wow, you'd have had some impact to double your money that quickly, and it would have been in place. They didn't put it in place. We've seen it before. Harry Kane didn't have it in place. His brother, his agent, didn't have it in place to stop his move to City before, and it didn't play out the way they wanted it. Unless you have it in black and white and it's written in that contract, what clubs, the hierarchy promise you, what you think you've heard, it means nothing.
Yeah. As you said, the domino effect of this transfer, whether it happens or not, could define a lot in how the season shakes out. Thanks a million, Gary. As you said, you'll be on comms duty for United Burnley, and you're doing the Celtic match tomorrow as well?
Yeah, really looking forward to that. I was initially told by all my Celtic fans that it would be, pretty easy, that first leg. It was anything but, and it's at risk now in terms of that Champions League. Celtic so good in the new format of the Champions League, the way it's done in a phase, really benefit from it. They were impressive at times. They must be thinking that they were going to be back there now. They put it so at risk. A lot of murmurings, isn't there, around Brendan Rodgers, not particularly happy, lack of investment. You're looking at the hierarchy there, thinking, well, they're comfortably winning the league. They're doing well in Europe last year. Why would they throw loads of money at it? But supporters want them to do that. They're questioning the board. And Brendan Rodgers was spot on when he said, when the supporters start questioning the board, it's the manager who's vulnerable then, because the board are going to say, I'm not listening to that. We'll get rid of the manager.
Yeah, lots of big things to unravel this week. I'm sure we'll check in with you again soon. Thanks a million, Gary.
Thanks, Ronan. Appreciate it.